I'm Daniel Hahn, Chief Influential Listener with Impact SAC and founder of A Way Forward. Enjoy this history moment because only by knowing how we got here can we make tomorrow better for all. During World War II, one of the largest migrations of black families to the West Coast from the South occurred. Families moved here for various reasons, including the fact that there were jobs open to black men and women in industries that supported the war effort, such as shipbuilding yards and steel mills. To support this migration of black families, the largest expansion of public housing in the Bay Area occurred during World War II. The housing available to black families was typically called temporary war housing. In 1946, more than half the total black population in the Bay Area lived in temporary war housing in cities such as Berkeley, Oakland, and Richmond. From 1949 to 1951, Bay Area cities permitted 75,000 residential units, but only 600 of those were available to black or other minority homebuyers, essentially trapping black families in the temporary war housing that was overcrowded due to the number of families moving and migrating to the West Coast. There was a systemic nature to the resistance to opening opportunities for black families in California that would enable them to participate in parts of our society and economy that would build generational wealth. For example, during, before, and after World War II, local officials attributed crime and disorder, specifically violent crime, to the growing population of black Southerners. The Oakland Observer newspaper wrote, quote, "It is very possible that the troubles comes from immigrant Negroes from the South, who are held well under control in the South, but coming north have found themselves thrilled with their new freedom," unquote. In 1926, Sidney Deering was the only black homeowner in Piedmont, California. There's a newspaper article at the time that said, "Deering menaced by third bomb, secret organization believed involved in attempt to oust Negro." Police refused to provide protection after he chose not to move, and a bomb was exploded on his front lawn. The city began condemnation proceedings on his property and eventually forced him to move. In 1952, Wilbur and Maurice Gary and their 7 children bought a house in San Pablo Rollingwood subdivision. This subdivision was built during the war with federal loans that required racial covenants prohibiting all 700 homes from being sold to African Americans, such as the Gary family. It's interesting to note, though, that the covenants such as this were officially invalidated 4 years earlier in 1948 by the Supreme Court in Shelley versus Kramer. The Rollingwood Improvement Association, like many other homeowners associations, they were created to continue the housing discrimination that courts had ruled were invalid. So the Rollingwood Improvement Association tried to negotiate a buyout with the Gary family, but they still remained. Upon moving in, they received death threats, violence, and intimidation by the residents of the community. The office of their African American real estate agent was vandalized, and the Klan placed a cross on their front lawn, while 400-person mob gathered at their home, stoned their house, and shouted threats. The sheriff's department was on scene and didn't make any arrests or stop the rock throwing. This activity continued for the Gary family. This sort of activity wasn't uncommon in the Bay Area during this time. In 1946 in Redwood City, John Walker, a black military veteran, his home was burned down after he received threats and demands to move out. In 1950s, the home of the San Francisco NAACP leader was burned in Santa Rosa. Somebody you might know, Hall of Fame baseball player Willie Mays. He moved to San Francisco to play for the San Francisco Giants in 1957, and was in the process of buying a home from a white man named Walter Nezdaloff, who was willing to sell Willie Mays this home to where he could be the first minority entrant into this neighborhood in San Francisco. But the owner soon changed his mind. Walter soon changed his mind after he was pressured by neighbors to refuse to sell, and his employer told him he would be destroying himself and the neighborhood, because the belief was the home values of a home would go down when a minority family moved in. He eventually rejected the offer from Willie Mays, even though he didn't want to. And he was quoted as saying at one point, "I'm just a union working man, and I would never get another job if I sold this house to that baseball player." So you have a man that wants to sell his house, but all these other pressures, all this other system prevents him from selling the house. After intervention from the San Francisco Council on Civic Unity and public attention paid to this situation due to Willie Mays' celebrity status, Mr. Nezdaloff decided to sell the Mays family his house. Then his realtor came to him and said he cannot help him sell this house to this black family because if he did, he would lose all his business and nobody would come to him for housing services. The week the Mays family moved in, the front window of their home was broken when somebody threw a rock through it. Willie Mays' wife, Marguerite, was quoted as saying, quote, "Down in Alabama, where we come from, you know your place, and that's something at least. But up here, it's all a lot of camouflage, grin in your face, and deceive you." This is a story of how discrimination, racism, and bias have played a significant role in California and cities throughout our country. It is also a story of how people from different backgrounds and different experiences came together and changed not only the circumstance of one person, but the circumstances of their community, their state, and our country. Thank you for listening, and let's make tomorrow better for all.